Welcome everyone to the heart of Tuscany and to a villa lost to time. Today I tell you the story of the project that made everything possible for us and how saving this villa gave us a livelihood. A renovation that asked of us everything that we had. With it all riding upon the need to open for bookings the following spring. Meaning we'd have just 6 months working day and night making our vision come to life. And executing a design that gave dignity and character back to this villa that had once lost it all. Join me as I take you through the highs and lows of this transformative renovation. But there is no beauty without pain. And so, let's together delve into the most stressful yet rewarding 6 months of our lives. When we first met this nameless villa, she was in remarkably good condition, at least externally. Inside, we saw there was a disastrous 1970s renovation and that animals had run amok. There was a stripping all of its original character, and it's a small mercy that the original owners ran out of funds before they could make alterations to the facade. But it was that stunning view that, even in deepest, darkest winter, told us there could be light at the end of the tunnel. To give you a sense of it, everything marked in blue and yellow would need to be demolished just to restore the original internal proportions. The silver lining of flimsy post-war interventions is they're easy enough to tear down, and we invested to make sure that any of the openings that we remade were structurally supported enough to last another several hundred years if necessary. And with this buzz of activity, we could see the opening of these spaces for the first time, removing the old division walls and bathing in the new natural light, left only with the dismay at the amount of damage done to the original parquet flooring throughout. And with the main restructuring of this historic villa well underway, we turned our attention to the revival of the extensively damaged woodwork that was original to the villa. And it was thanks to today's video sponsor, the Woodworkers Guild of America, for allowing us to have the confidence to take on this mammoth task. Its vast online library of woodworking instructions, ideas, and information had us covered at every turn. Like this expert guidance of learning how to stain and finish our repairs to this antique doorway that matched the quality of craftsmanship from even 100 years ago. And this detailed walkthrough of how different saws can give varying results to each cut was invaluable as we learned the most appropriate way to reshape salvaged parquet flooring to reconstitute the areas that had been destroyed by the destructive 1970s renovation. And after completing a satisfying dry run to see how the precision of our work had paid off, we had an abundance of resources to understand how best to bind the wood together and ultimately how to revive the work that we'd done for the correct finish. I mean, just look at that result. Check the link in the description below to get the first full year of Woodworkers Guild of America Premium for just $1.49. Offer valid for new members only. With the villa gradually revealing her character, the property started to have a warmth about it, and so we pushed ahead with the very first room, the kitchen. One of the rooms that we'd opened up and where the flooring had actually been entirely replaced in the old renovation. But we used this to our advantage to embed new piping and put down characteristic new flooring. Terracotta, to be precise, from the town of Impruneta just south of Florence. Solid brass handles and an artisanally made fireplace for the kitchen extraction hood were all chosen to meet our design philosophy of using old world and classic materials and motifs where possible. And of course, our trusty Carrara marble counters quarried just up the road were an essential part of this. So too was a choice of antique lighting, which started to evoke a sense of the dark academia vibe that we were going for in this space. The idea was to tie it all together with a focal point of a Tuscan style fireplace. And with the final elements of design coming together, we could begin to see the transformative result. A transformation we'd managed to pull off in just our first 5 weeks. An essential milestone because we would now be moving into the villa, allowing us to work day and night to push the project forward. On the aspect opposing the fireplace, we created a smart cabinet that was a mix of decoration and occasionally used kitchen appliances. And with that, the main build phase of the kitchen was done. My hope with this design was to create an almost cozy old world aesthetic, one where you could have all of the modern necessities of a kitchen that were mostly hidden and that otherwise felt like you were in some antique meeting space, the real heart of the home. We'll return to the kitchen in just a bit for the final reveal. But now to the grandest room of the villa, the Salon, which stretched the entirety of the facade of the Piano Nobile at the front of the villa. This south-facing masterpiece connects to multiple terraces and has sweeping views of the Tuscan countryside, full of potential. But we had to use the corridor which ran through the core of the house to bring the powerful cables and tubes needed to heat this space in winter and cool it in summer, being so exposed. We started with the smaller space here, this being the studio at the base of the tower, but it was all open and connected to the adjoining larger spaces, with the dining area destined for this middle section and the two spaces tied together with these Gothic chandeliers. Beyond, we had the expanse of the sitting room and the sun bay beyond it, with the parquet below, the painting on the walls, the AC installed and the lighting above. It began coming together. And with a very sleepy M modeling the sofa that we chose for this space, we can talk about the furnishings and design. Keeping the color tones and palette, we otherwise went for quite an eclectic mix of styles, which we think homogenized quite well. But we wanted to add more intentional design to the space. So, after some late night research on YouTube, I learned how to make these custom mirrors. Not difficult in their execution, but more so challenging in their gargantuan size, reaching 2 meters in height. I wanted to create several of these mirrors to reflect the beautiful vistas that could be seen out of the windows to widen this otherwise quite long and narrow space. And this reflects rather a trial and error approach that we took to this whole renovation. We had a grand idea in mind and we just thought, we've never done this before, but let's give it a go anyway. And so attaching our first mirrors were slightly more stressful and put on a knife edge than necessary, but after the first one, we got more into our stride. One learning that I had from doing an additional mirror in the dining room was to make the rim slightly larger so we could drill directly into the wall when mounting. But this was only the beginning, as the next step was something we were completely going to be learning on the fly and on our own. These handmade stucco detailings made by local artisans were going to be framing all of these mirrors, making them have a sense of permanence. And so you can see our rather chaotic attempts to make sure that the glue was fixing properly and my mishap of putting the ladders in the bucket. But despite fumbling our way through, they started to come together fabulously and tie into the core design philosophy of this renovation, giving the feeling that they had perhaps always been here. Looking at it now, it's almost beyond belief that it used to be divided up into these pokey little spaces and completely overrun with decay. Now, because this villa was ultimately destined for bookings, we had to create a design that almost jumped through the still images that we'd be taking to represent this space, that would invite anyone that watched it to instantly imagine themselves being immersed within this Tuscan beauty. Speaking of, the exterior was now cleared and starting to show the early signs of recovery. But before we could give our full attention there, we at least had a cozy center by which we could feel comfortable as we continued our work to restore the rest of the internals. And as we come back to the central core of the corridor, we see at the end there what was actually our very first job right at the start of the project. And while we'd be doing total transformations of the bathrooms upstairs, the one on the ground floor that would see much less frequent use, we thought of doing a slightly different type of renovation. Since speed was of the essence so we could move in as soon as possible, we decided to work with the bones of the bathroom that was already there. And since it was one that was actually installed later than all the others, the plumbing was fairly serviceable with not much more needing to be done. And so we went for a facelift, and the terracotta flooring made it seem like a slightly less hostile space, and fortunately the motifs of the tiles actually created a Victorian effect when painted white. And with all of these subtle changes made, the bathroom actually looked rather cute, but more importantly, it was perfectly working. This allowed us to push ahead with the more transformative plumbing elsewhere in the villa, most notably up in the tower, where below we would create a full bathroom for the adjoining bedroom, but up that narrow staircase to the exposed panoramic view, we wanted to create an alfresco spa experience. Now you may have noticed there we actually plonked a vintage lion paw bathtub up there to at least get us inspired, even though it wasn't connected yet. Down below, we eventually brought a water boiler and encased a shower into the understair area. The divisions that we created allowed for the bathroom itself to be private and to also add a threshold for the access of the tower, important for keeping the elements out, but also for creating a nicer and more grand experience as you went up the stairs. Finally, we found this series of incredible solid brass light fixtures that, when installed alongside some huge drapes, curtains, created this stunning indoor-outdoor space. And with that, we transformed a space that was just home to pigeons for the last century into something that was truly magical. We were now towards the end of February, and that stunning afternoon light that bathed the villa in ever-increasing intensity acted as a mesmerizing yet constant reminder of our fast-approaching need to open our doors. And so we pushed ahead with the remaining bathrooms. In total, there would be 6 in the villa, and each would have their own character, but would more or less be tied to this vintage Victorian aesthetic. Now, an interesting fact of this villa is that it was actually divided into 2 separate apartments on its 2 main floors in this disastrous 1970s renovation, and so attention had to be given to unifying them once more, giving a sense of centrality to this once important grand staircase. Now, while the stone steps of the staircase were clearly original, the baluster had been added in the mid-century, and we took the perhaps controversial decision to keep it, as we thought that it actually helped tell the story of the history of this property. Which neatly brings us to the transformations of the bedrooms, the primary suite of which we wanted to be an absolute showstopper. We had to first repair the old external blind mechanisms, one of which had a thankfully abandoned wasp nest inside, and then choose a colour that would set the tone for the rest of the transformation. Now, a suite is not just a bedroom, of course. We also gave it a large private sitting room with a dressing area, with the ensuite beyond and exclusive access to the alfresco spa in the turret above. All this to say that the bed itself therefore needed to be suitably grand to match the footprint of the space. Cue one of the more heart-stopping moments of the project. Not ideal, and also not the first time that something almost fell on my head, knocking me out cold, but fortunately the pommel was easily reattached. And without further ado, let's fast forward to one of the most satisfying before and afters of this whole project. The fast-approaching springtime Tuscan sun bathed our canvas, and for the first time with the principal bedroom done at least, the end began to feel like it was in sight. Not only that, but details that had been lost in the grime and decay of the previous decade were refreshed, and it became clear that the original ingenious designers and builders of this villa had intended the natural light and vista to play a main role of the interior design. And speaking of, one of my favourite little details that I added was this hatch that led through to the adjoining laundry room that you can see fully renovated here. With the same love and care given to the remaining bedrooms, 5 in total, we were able to give our own sense of style, which, as you may now guess, is this delicate mix between contemporary and classic. Not specifically of any one era, but hopefully therefore utterly timeless. a style that will still look stunning even a generation from now. But there's so many details of this renovation that took place that it would just be overwhelming to lay it all in one video. So instead, here's some honorable mentions of some other transformations that took place, like this Art Deco style cinema that we placed in the back part of the villa. And my favorite feature are these original 1920s light fixtures which we found at the local market of Arezzo, which set the tone perfectly for our famous annual Eurovision party that we threw amongst our friends in the cinema room and evoked the roaring 20s in a more modern campy style. And with that, the first days of spring had arrived and we were just weeks away from opening our doors. We rushed to finish the final rooms like the library and the gym. This here being the room where we originally threw down the mattress on the floor and camped out of for the first few months. Quite the transformation. But it was the one room of the villa that had this characteristic ceiling, perhaps from the 1950s, and so it had the least amount of work to be done, and therefore provided the perfect spot to build out from. Now, one area I haven't taken you to at all is this enormous panoramic terrace attached to the kitchen. With its southeast exposure, it gets gorgeous light for most of the day, and as such we decided this would be the area where we create most of the coffee and dining moments for the outdoors. And so we just had to soften the space with fairly extensive potted plants, and with that we could bring to life this new adjoinement to the kitchen, bringing the outdoors in. We continued this effect on the opposite side of the house with the newly created games room, leading on to a stunning sunset pool garden that was an absolute mammoth of a task to create. The transformation was total, and we took just 3 weeks to do it. It's incredible the productivity that comes out of necessity. Working out the exact size and positioning, clearing and burning the old bramble with the help of our farmer neighbor, and having the 7.5 meter in diameter hole dug. And beyond the digging of the hole, the entirety of this project was done by ourselves. Building the pool, creating the bespoke fountain, and re-landscaping it completely. And it's only when I went back editing this footage I realized the vast complexity of the job. It's almost like one blocks out the trauma after the fact. So if you'd like to see this project realized in its own video, let me know down below. The result, however, was like a picture which spoke 1,000 words. And just like that, in 6 months, our time had come to an end, and so had our project. With too many changes to show in just one video, like this lighting scheme which we put throughout the parkland, perhaps we can come back to that another time. But what I can show you is the cinematic Instagram video which I made to launch our rental season, the perfect way to see how far we'd come. But this isn't the end of the story. In fact, it's kind of just the beginning. And I'm taking you now to the present day, when just a few days ago we returned at the end of the tourist rental season to collect a few of the items that we had originally bought that were more on the antique side and that were starting to show signs of wear after its heavy usage. We brought them to the Palazzo, where we'll be able to refurbish and place them in the grand empty rooms here, and where our works throughout the summer to bring heating, cooling, electrics, and furnishing, all made possible thanks to a successful season of renting Villa Bellatorre, so named due to its beautiful tower. And so it won't be long until we return to Tuscany, to this renewed jewel of Art Nouveau Italian architecture, with much of the second-hand furniture now removed, allowing us to take a fresh look at the design, perhaps with your guidance too, with your comments down below, and to tell a fuller story of all of the points of interest, past, present, and future, that you'd like to know. I look forward to joining the lively and lovely community discourse. And if you're not subscribed already, please consider doing so. It means more than you can ever know. Next week, we'll be returning to exciting developments at the Palazzo. So until next time, love from Italy.